On November 30th, 1939, the Soviet Union launched an invasion that was supposed to last 2 weeks. Stalin expected total victory almost instantly. Finland had barely 3 million people. The Soviet Union had over 170 million. On paper, this war should never have been close. Yet 105 days later, the Red Army had suffered one of the most humiliating defeats in modern military history. 5 fatal mistakes turned an easy conquest into a national embarrassment for the Soviet Union. Fatal Mistake 1. Stalin's purges had gutted the Red Army of its best officers just 2 years before the invasion began. Between 1937 and 1938, Stalin executed or imprisoned tens of thousands of Soviet military officers. Nearly all senior Red Army commanders were removed, including 3 of 5 marshals and most division commanders. Officers were replaced by men chosen for political loyalty, not battlefield skill. Many new commanders had little real combat experience and even less independent judgment. Soldiers were led by officers too afraid to make decisions without approval from Moscow first. This fear paralyzed the army at every level, from generals down to junior lieutenants. The Soviet military that invaded Finland was a hollow shell of its former self. Confidence was high in Moscow, but competence on the ground was dangerously low. Fatal Mistake 2. The Soviet Union completely underestimated how brutal the Finnish winter terrain would be. Temperatures during the Winter War dropped below -40 degrees Celsius in some regions. Soviet soldiers arrived wearing summer uniforms, expecting a short and easy campaign. Many young conscripts had never even seen snow like this before deployment. Thousands of Soviet soldiers suffered severe frostbite within the first weeks of fighting. Some froze to death in their sleep, huddled together for warmth that never came. Finnish forces, by contrast, wore white camouflage and moved on skis across the frozen landscape. Finnish troops knew every forest trail, every frozen lake, and every hidden path through the terrain. The Soviets brought tanks and trucks built for open roads, not narrow forest tracks. Vehicles became stuck in deep snow, turning entire convoys into stationary targets. Finland's brutal winter became its greatest ally, and the Soviets never adapted to it. Fatal Mistake 3. Soviet commanders sent massive columns down single narrow roads with no flank protection at all. This tactic worked on the open plains of Ukraine, but Finland was covered in dense forest. Finnish ski troops used this weakness perfectly, striking from the trees on both sides at once. The Soviets called this brutal tactic the motti, a Finnish word meaning a chopped pile of firewood. Finnish forces would split a long Soviet column into smaller, isolated pockets using fast ambush strikes. Each pocket would then be surrounded, cut off from supplies, and destroyed piece by piece. At the Battle of Suomussalmi, an entire Soviet division was trapped and annihilated using these tactics. Nearly 30,000 Soviet soldiers were killed or captured in this single battle alone. Finnish forces at Suomussalmi numbered only a few thousand men in comparison. The mismatch in casualties revealed just how badly Soviet tactics had failed in forest warfare. Soviet generals kept repeating the same road-bound strategy again and again across the front. Each time, Finnish ski troops exploited the same predictable weakness with devastating results. Fatal Mistake 4. The Soviet Union badly misjudged Finnish morale and their willingness to fight to the death. Moscow believed Finnish workers would welcome Soviet troops as liberators from an oppressive government. Soviet propaganda even prepared a puppet government ready to install once Finland fell quickly. Instead, Finns from every background united fiercely to defend their newly independent nation. Finland had only gained independence from Russia in 1917, just over 2 decades earlier. That independence was hard-won, and Finns were not willing to give it up without a desperate fight. Finnish soldiers were highly motivated, defending their own homes, forests, and families directly. Soviet soldiers, by contrast, were often unsure why they were even fighting this war at all. This gap in motivation showed clearly in how each side fought through the brutal winter. Finnish snipers, most famously Simo Häyhä, inflicted devastating losses on advancing Soviet units. Häyhä alone was credited with over 500 confirmed kills during the brutal winter campaign. Finnish morale actually increased with each unexpected victory against the much larger invading force. Soviet morale, already low from poor leadership, collapsed further with every costly defeat suffered. Fatal Mistake 5. The Red Army relied on outdated, rigid tactics that completely failed against a smaller, faster enemy. Soviet doctrine emphasized massed infantry attacks supported by heavy artillery and armor. This approach worked reasonably well on open ground, but Finland offered no such open ground. Dense forests and narrow roads made large formations slow, clumsy, and painfully easy to ambush. Soviet tanks advanced without proper infantry support, making them vulnerable to Finnish close-range attacks. Finnish soldiers developed the Molotov cocktail as a simple, effective anti-tank weapon during this war. Soviet tank crews often had no idea how to counter these cheap, improvised incendiary weapons. Communication between Soviet units was poor, with orders often arriving late or not at all. Soviet air support frequently bombed the wrong targets, sometimes even hitting their own retreating soldiers. This lack of coordination turned potential Soviet advantages into wasted resources and unnecessary losses. Rigid Soviet military doctrine simply could not adapt fast enough to Finland's unconventional style of warfare. By January 1940, the world was stunned by Finland's continued resistance against overwhelming odds. International newspapers ran headlines praising Finnish courage against the massive Soviet military machine. Volunteers from Sweden, Norway, and even the United States tried to reach Finland to help. Stalin grew furious as Soviet casualties climbed into the hundreds of thousands within just weeks. Soviet military leadership finally began replacing failed commanders with more capable and flexible officers. New Soviet strategy focused on concentrated artillery power against the strong Finnish defensive line. The Mannerheim Line, Finland's main fortified defense, faced increasingly heavy and coordinated Soviet bombardment. By February 1940, sheer numbers began to finally overwhelm Finland's exhausted and outnumbered defenders. Finnish troops, though brilliant tactically, simply could not replace their mounting losses like the Soviets could. On March 13, 1940, Finland was forced to accept harsh Soviet peace terms. Finland lost about 11% of its territory, including the important city of Viborg. Yet Finland remained an independent nation, something Stalin's original invasion plan never intended. Now let us examine the deeper lessons hidden inside each of Stalin's 5 fatal mistakes. The first lesson: purging experienced leadership for political loyalty destroys a military's actual fighting effectiveness. An army led by fearful, inexperienced officers cannot react quickly to a changing battlefield. The second lesson: underestimating terrain and climate can doom even the most powerful military force. No amount of manpower can overcome an enemy that understands the land better than you do. The third lesson: rigid, predictable tactics become fatal weaknesses against a smaller, more adaptable opponent. Repeating the same failed strategy only invites the same devastating results again and again. The fourth lesson: never underestimate the willpower of a nation defending its own home and freedom. Soldiers fighting for survival will always outperform soldiers who are simply following distant orders. The fifth lesson: military doctrine must evolve constantly, or it becomes a liability instead of a strength. What works in one type of warfare can completely fail in another environment entirely. These 5 mistakes did not exist in isolation from one another during this brutal war. They combined and reinforced each other in a devastating and connected chain of failure. Stalin's purges removed the very officers who might have questioned reckless, road-bound tactics. Poor tactics led directly into Finland's brutal winter terrain without any real preparation. Underestimated Finnish morale meant Soviet forces faced far fiercer resistance than anyone in Moscow expected. And rigid doctrine meant the Red Army struggled badly to adapt once real problems appeared. Each failure fed the next, turning a quick invasion into a prolonged and costly disaster. The Winter War exposed serious flaws inside the Soviet military machine to the entire watching world. Adolf Hitler personally took note of the Red Army's clear struggles during this short war. Some historians believe Finland's fierce resistance directly influenced Hitler's later decision to invade the Soviet Union. If the Red Army looked this weak against a small nation, Hitler reasoned, Germany could win quickly. Finnish soldiers fought with incredible skill, courage, and determination throughout this entire brutal winter war. Yet even Finland's remarkable resistance could not fully overcome the simple weight of Soviet numbers forever. The verdict of history remains clear on this remarkable and unlikely military underdog story. Finland did not defeat the Soviet Union completely, but it denied Stalin his easy, quick victory. A small, determined nation exposed the deep cracks hiding inside a massive, seemingly unstoppable military power. Stalin's 5 fatal mistakes were not simple bad luck or unavoidable circumstances beyond anyone's control. They were direct, avoidable choices made by leadership blinded by overconfidence and crushing political paranoia. Finland's Winter War remains one of history's greatest lessons in the true cost of hubris. A nation that respects its enemy will always fight smarter than one that does not. Finland's small army, brilliant tactics, and unbreakable will prove that size alone never guarantees victory.